Hello! Arrtx has sent me some of their soft oil pastels to try out in these really pretty boxes. They're brand new, wrapped in plastic, so I'll open those up and let's get into it! That's a lot easier to see. I really love these boxes. They feel so velvety and lovely. So they've sent me a large set of 48 vibrant colours and a smaller set of 10 white pastels, but I really want to open the big box first. There's a layer of foam on top just to keep everything from getting smudged and falling out. And you can see the pastels through that a little bit, so I'll just peel that off and we can see all of the colours and how pretty they look. They always look so nice when the set has been unused and none of them are dinged yet. But we can see it's a fairly extensive colour palette with a lot of reds and oranges by the looks of things. Then it moves into blues and greens. Then we have some purples and just a few earth colours at the end there. Although I think some of the earths are actually up around the orange section. We'll come back to those in a minute. I'll just show you the smaller set of 10 white oil pastels if I can get that foam out. So these are all the same. White is usually the colour that disappears the quickest, so I'm really grateful they've sent me these spare ones because now I don't have to worry about running out of white anytime soon. They also feel incredibly soft, as you saw me touching it there. So I'll be putting this box to one side because there is a white in the 48 set as well, but I just think it's really nice that they've sent me these extra white ones. I really appreciate that. Today I'm going to be focusing on this large set and we'll get into it, swatching, all of that fun stuff. But I'll just take a closer look at one or two of the pastels themselves. The packaging is quite plain, but they have the names of the colours on there and I'm so happy about that. I find it difficult when there's only a number, but when there's a name as well, it just makes it so much easier to find particular colours. The pastels themselves are very soft and they transfer easily onto my skin. They feel waxy and creamy, which is what I like in an oil pastel. I'm not a big fan of firmer oil pastels, so for me I always prefer the softer ones. I really am intrigued by this colour, macaron pink, if it will ever stay in focus. It's so light, but it's got this lovely lilac-y pinky tinge to it. This is a set of 48 and the largest set that I know of is 72. This looks to be quite a wide range of colours though, and I was deciding on the paper that I was going to use. I have some Art Spectrum Colour Fix paper in smooth rather than too rough, and I also have a few spare pieces of Colour Fix paper which I bought at various times. This pastel paper is like a cardstock, but with a bit of texture so it can grab those oil pastels, and it also doesn't let the oil seep through the paper, so I like using this stuff. I also have this old pastel paper by Canson, and I thought I would use some of this to do my swatching on. One side is really toothy, as you can see there, but I thought I would flip it over because the other side is a lot smoother and I can do my swatching on this side. Unfortunately, the sheet is far too big for this box, so I'm going to have to get my ruler out and measure it up so I can cut a piece of paper to fit inside the box lid. I also wanted to use my new Across the Nullarbor ruler and pencil, so this was a good opportunity to do that. The reason I like to swatch colours out first is because I like to see what I'm working with, and this often gives me ideas as to what kind of picture I'm going to draw, because then I know exactly what the colour palette is going to be. It's also quite difficult to see darker colours on the art supplies themselves because quite often they will look very similar to each other until you swatch them out and then you can see what the colour's going to look like on the paper. And of course, I'll be linking the Arrtx oil pastels in the description below so you can check them out. They're usually available on Amazon or on their website depending where you are in the world. Ages later and I finally have this swatch chart all ruled up, and I've done it so they match the position of the pastels, but actually it does need to be turned around 90 degrees so I can see the writing. And I will be swatching it from right to left today. It's a little bit awkward, but it does make sense when it's sideways. First up we have the white, and it's pretty opaque as you can see here, although it's not completely covering that black line. I'd probably have to add a lot more in. And yeah, these things are super messy. I was actually smudging them with my fingers because this paper still has a bit of a tooth and they just look a bit funny if I swatch them out without blending them in the paper. So I swatched one group at a time and then you'll see me rubbing over them with my finger and wiping it with a tissue. I made such a mess. and I really don't like touching pastels, although oil pastels aren't as bad as the chalky ones. Touching them always makes me shudder, but the oil ones, once I get past my initial squeamishness, I'm usually okay with them. There are actually a few more earth tones than I was remembering at the beginning of this video. Tan, ochre and khaki in particular are away from the other browns. But so far in this top row we have a lot of warm tones, and the pastels themselves are really nice to use. All of them drew onto the paper really easily. They were soft and smooth with no scratchiness. And you can see there's a lot of bright colours in here along with some more neutral tones. There are also light colours like the Peach Puff and Sakura Pink, so there is quite a variety of light and dark ones. Plus loads of bright colours, which always makes me happy. I kept catching my fingernails on the edges of some of the pastels and it was just lifting colour off immediately. I had it all under my nails and all over the skin of my fingers. I'm really hoping these are non-toxic. I don't think they're too bad, actually, but I did make sure to wash my hands thoroughly after this with liberal amounts of soap and water. As I was working my way through the blues here, I was thinking that one colour I am missing is maybe an indigo. I always like a really dark indigo, but otherwise the Prussian blue is quite dark, and it's kind of close to an indigo, I guess, but I would have liked maybe a shade darker, just to have that really deep shadow colour. There are a few other colours here which seem to be out of order, like that turquoise could be swapped around with tender green, but I just kept them in the same order that they were because I just didn't want to have to pull all of those pastels out and rearrange them. I was being super lazy today. It does bother me that macaron pink is right next to that cadmium green though, although I'm happy that cadmium green is in there. That's a nice dark green, and you know me, I love to have a dark green in any kind of palette. It's such a useful shade, and I always miss it when it's not there. As for light fastness, I'm not seeing any information on their website about light fast ratings. Though I think as a general rule, things like oil pastels do hold colour better than watercolours, for example. The waxy binder, I think, makes colours more resistant to light. That could be completely wrong, but that's what I've read in a few places. But I'm just letting you know that I don't know before anyone asks in the comments. So I'm not going to worry about it today, I'm just going to use whatever colours I like. And usually I store a lot of my artworks in folders anyway, so it's not that big of a problem. I'm just smudging out the last few dark shades here, and I have got oil pastels all over my hands, so I really need to clean up before I do anything else and throw those tissues away. That's much better. I got most of it off. I think there's a bit of staining on one hand which came off later after a few more washes. But let's take a look at this chart now I've finished swatching it, and of course it will be like this in the box when I'm looking at it, just to match up with each pastel. I think in this 48 set, there's a decent range between those warm colours and then the cooler ones. I like the darker browns, and that black is super dark and opaque. I also don't know what the pigment numbers are in these either, I just remembered that. That macaron pink is so light it's really hard to see on camera. But now it's time to test these out properly with some artworks. This first one is inspired from a photo I took while we were on our road trip. An amazing sunset on the Nullarbor Plain that just looks like a painted sky. And I was trying to recreate this with oil pastels, and I'm actually thinking I want to do it as a much larger oil painting, but a pastel drawing is a good way to get a feel for how it's going to look. I wasn't really sure what I was doing here, so I just started dropping colours on, and I'm using some little cotton buds or Q-tips to blend the oil pastels in with each other. I'm using some of that Colourfix paper in white. I cut down a sheet in half because I thought it would be easier to do a smaller picture rather than a huge one. I was really regretting putting that dark brown there, but it did work out in the end. It just took a few layers. You can see I'm struggling a little bit here to blend some of the pastel in with each other, and I've got a few edges in the colour which I would prefer to be smoother, but I often find with art supplies like pencils and especially oil pastels that the first layer is the most difficult to get down because you're working on dry paper and the pastel gets quite easily absorbed into the paper, so it doesn't move around as much as I would like. It also needs to be blended pretty quickly. If it's sitting on the paper for too long it does dry out quite a lot and then it just won't budge at all, so I was working quite quickly. I did try to use a brush dipped in linseed oil, but it wasn't firm enough, and so I went back to the cotton buds dipped in the oil, and that helped to blend it out a lot more easily. And I've noticed that once you add more layers of oil pastel on top, it becomes so much easier to blend it all together. That lowest layer is always the most difficult, and you can see I'm making a bit of a mess of the sky. It's not quite as nice as what I had in my photograph, but I just kept persevering and I ended up with something that I'm quite happy with. It's not perfect, but this is also a first attempt, and I do think I really want to revisit this one with oil paints so I can hopefully achieve a better blend. But the pastels themselves worked pretty well, and the colours are gorgeous. There's no nasty fillers that I can see, it's just basically the wax and the pigments, so the colour load is really saturated, and there was not a single one in my set that had any kind of scratchiness. They were all nice and soft. I did a review on the Paul Rubens oil pastels last year or the year before, and those weren't as good as these Arrtx ones. I think I had a light green or something in the Paul Rubens set that just went really funny. It was quite scratchy and it wasn't laying down nicely like the other colours, whereas in this set I haven't had a single issue with any of them. They all went down beautifully, and now I'm adding on layers over the top. This is where I'm finding it so much easier to blend them in. So that's my advice from my own experience with oil pastels, is keep layering the colour on, because the more that gets on there, the easier it is to move it all around. And because a lot of them are quite opaque, they will sit nicely on top of other colours. And you can build up the layers to your heart's content, as long as you have a paper that's not too smooth. It does need to have some tooth so it can grip that oil pastel. Eventually the oil pastel will just start to skate off each other if there's too much applied. But this Colourfix paper gets 3 or 4 layers really easily, and I think I could have added more again on top of this, but I did about 3 layers for the most part. Getting the clouds right was the most difficult part of this picture, and it's definitely not as perfect as I would have liked it to be, but sometimes we just have to let go of perfection and just enjoy the process. I was having a good time laying the colours on top of each other, and now they were cooperating a lot more easily. You can also use a palette knife to squish it on for a more textured look, but in the end I decided I just wanted to keep it nice and smooth, so I went back to just blending everything into the sky once more, although I think the palette knife did help it just a little bit to make it look more natural, especially around the lower part of the painting. Or is it a drawing? I never know, but I'm already getting through that white, so I will be glad of extra ones over time. White can be used to blend in with other pastels to make even lighter colours, and it also adds opacity to the drawing. I was getting to the point where I was just fiddling with it, so I decided this is going to be the finished piece here. I really like the vibrant colours in this, particularly the reds and yellows around the sun. It is a little bit messy in the sky though, and I do want to have another attempt at this particular picture. I can't fault the quality of the pastels themselves though. They were really great to use. So I'm going to do a second piece, and it's also going to be a skyscape. So let's get going with that one. And my desk is such a mess from all of the pastels. Oh well, may as well do another while it's messy. And for this one I'm going with a completely different colour palette. I saw this photo online and I just had to draw it at some point. The colours are amazing, and I'll try to remember to credit the photographer below. This 48 set had a lot of the colours that I wanted for this particular painting, and of course it was a good chance to use all of the purples and the pinks, including that macaron pink which I used at the base there. That's the lightest colour, and then I'm trying to make a gradient going up into the darkest purple. It was a mess again until I started adding on those top layers, and then they started to blend together a lot more smoothly. As always, that lowest layer is the most stubborn. I spent quite a long time on this particular picture, and I was finding that my fingers were the best blending tools after trying a few other things, but I was using the cotton buds where I could, so I didn't have to touch the pastels too much with my hands. I added black in to get the deepest shadows, and it blended well with other colours. It's also incredibly dark, and I love the black so much in this set. This picture ended up being really challenging to do, and once again I don't think I did it quite as much justice as I would have liked, but I just loved the colour palette in this and I really enjoyed making this picture. There's something about oil pastels that's very tactile, and I just really like using them. I need to use them more often so I can get better with them, but these ones in particular were really great to use, and I think they might be some of my new favourite oil pastels. I made a bit of a mess of the clouds, but I do love the colours in this, and I might like to revisit this picture as well and have a second attempt. It's not looking too bad, it's just that some of the clouds feel a little bit too regimented, like I haven't got that natural look to them. That's just a bit of self-critique, so I can see what I can improve on later, not meaning to be hard on myself or anything like that. Like any artist, I'm still growing and learning as I go, but oh dear, my desk was embedded with oil pastels and I had to scrub it down thoroughly. But that's everything I got done today in this video. I love these oil pastels. They're so smooth and vibrant, and I would be seriously tempted to get that 75 set just to get all the extra colours. I glued the swatch sheet into the lid so I can't lose it. I would definitely recommend these if you're looking for a reasonably priced set to try out. The only thing is that they don't come as individual colours except for the whites, and I've got loads of them now. So that may be something to take into consideration, that you can't get individual ones as open stock. Quality wise, my first impressions are they're excellent, and I had no issues with any of them. I'd like to thank Arrtx for sending me these oil pastels. I've been really impressed with their products lately. Their alcohol markers and paint pens are really good too. And in case you're wondering, the fixative I'm going to cover these pictures with is by Sennelier. It stinks so badly, so this needs to be done outside because it will just stink the room out. It is so strong, but you just give it a light coating over the top and this will set the oil pastels and stop them from being sticky and transferring back onto your hands. With no fixative, oil pastel pictures take forever to dry, if they ever do at all. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. You might like to click subscribe for more videos, and here are some other oil pastel reviews I've done in the past. I hope you're having a great day out there, and I'll see you all again in my next video. Swatch you later. Bye!